always for the flavor. Yeah, mostly for the flavor. Oh, flavor is the best. Energy.
You have to be on their side. They're awful.
They aren't awful.
They're pretty awful.
You and all your people just want what's best for yourselves.
No, it's not just best for me. It's better for everyone.
What you think is best for everyone is not best for me.
They just don't understand.
They think they're being progressive. They just want to be cool.
Maybe things worked that way, like back in the 80s, but get with the times.
It's not about the times. It's the mainstream media. You're just following what the celebrities are doing.
I'm sorry that my opinion just happens to align with some celebrities.
It didn't used to.
I'm not 7 anymore.
I mean, I think they're just stuck in their ways.
They're well-intentioned, but they just don't see what you and I see.
It's sad, really. I wish they could just see what we already know.
It's just a fact. iPhones are better than Androids.
Ooh, you've got a USB-C port. I've had that for 7 years.
It's more than that, though. It's titanium.
My camera's so much better than yours.
Really? Can yours zoom in on the moon?
This has been a battle in our family for years, and it's really gotten out of control.
What does titanium even do?
You and your green bubble people don't care about what people need.
Your phone is like $1,400.
Got a really good trade-in deal.
Every family gathering, every time we get together, it's hard because we know it's going to end in a fight.
iPhones are for snobs.
And Androids are for nerds.
Elitist.
Hacker.
I just have a VPN so I can watch football games. If that's hacking, take me to jail. No, wait.
Can't we put our differences aside and just be a family?
We could if you weren't trying to indoctrinate the baby.
I know it's not the most important thing to fight over.
Would you ever switch to iPhone to try to bring your family together?
And join those crazies? No way.
We live in a divided family, and I don't think that's ever going to change.
Would you ever switch to Android to try to bring your family together?
Absolutely not. iPhones are better, and I'm not losing this argument.
Hey, welcome. I'm Pastor Kyle, and I'm here with Cody, and we're in the Fort Dodge Worship Center as we're getting ready to kick off one of our worship services. We're so excited for you to be joining us right now.
Yeah, and right off the bat, we need you to hear that we're a no-matter church, and what that means is no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or even what's been done to you, we need you to know that God loves you and we love you, and we're really glad that you're here. We're a church where you don't have to clean yourself up to be here. You don't have to be perfect. We're just really glad that you're here.
Yeah, and we want to get a chance to know you. And being known is a big step around Prairie Lakes Church, and the simplest way that we invite you to take that step is to text NEW to 99581. You have a name, we want to learn, we want to celebrate you and this bold step that you're taking. And so listen, if you take the 30 seconds to fill that out, we're going to mail you an Amazon gift card. Who doesn't like Amazon, right? And so we'll get one of those to you in the mail this week.
Yeah, an Amazon gift card, I mean, why not?
Why not?
And the next step that we take here, and we talk about it every week, is giving generously. And your generosity, it fuels our mission here, and our mission is to cover the state of Iowa with no matter churches. No matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or what's been done to you, you can walk in that God loves you and that we love you. So if you want to partner with us in our mission, you can do that by giving generously, even if it's for the very first time, online by going to prairielakes.org/give.
Yeah, and we want to say, again, thank you for being here. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to worship with you today. Let's go ahead and join our worship team now.
And clothe me in garments of praise. Jesus, forever my song will be you. I'm living in freedom. You've taken my burdens away. Jesus, forever my song will be you. Only for you. For the cross that you bore and the death that that you paid, for the victory you won over death and the grave. And this is the reason I sing, for the hope that you give and the joy that you bring, for the promise that heaven is waiting for me. And this is the reason I sing, for the cross that you bore and the debt that you paid, for the victory you won over death and the grave. And this is the reason I sing, for the hope that you give and the joy that you bring, for the promise that heaven is waiting for me. This is the reason I sing. And Jesus, the reason I sing. Jesus, the reason I sing.
Hey everybody, welcome to Prairie Lakes. I know we probably said that to you a couple times already this weekend, but I want to say it again. And I also want to say something that maybe you've heard us say a time or two, and that is this. We're really glad that you're here, and here's why. Because when you decide, like you have today, to just show up, just put yourself in a position like you're doing today, as simple as that might sound, God really can do some amazing things, and sometimes not so amazing, but he can do something because you're here. So we're really glad. We're really glad that you're here. Hey, we are this weekend. We're kicking off a new series that we're calling "Not in It to Win It." Okay, not in it to win it, and basically it's about Hawkeye football. No, it's it's not what it's about. Okay, what it is about is actually, it's kind of a little hard to explain. So here's where we're going to start this weekend. Start with a little bit of a story. I don't know if you have had this experience or not, but whenever I watch like a newer movie or a newer show, whatever, and that show depicts what it was like to live through the pandemic. Whenever I'm watching something that depicts that time, could be comedy, drama, fiction, whatever, but if it's set in 2020 and I'm watching it, whenever I watch a show like that, I almost get sick to my stomach, literally. I've noticed that. I'm wondering, do you have that experience? Have you had that experience? I get a little irritated. I get a little anxious even. I just find that I do not want to relive that time in my mind. I just don't. Even if it's just by watching some dumb show, like I don't want to go back in my mind and remember what it was like, remember what I felt, and blah, blah. I just don't. And maybe that's your experience too. You know, maybe you know what I'm talking about. So here's why I start with that fun walk down memory lane. I am a little worried that history is going to repeat itself, okay? I'm a little worried that history is going to repeat itself. Now, before you go, oh man, 4 weeks on the job, Jesse, and the wheels are coming off. You're already losing it. Maybe. But just to clarify, I'm not worried about the pandemic repeating itself. I'm not going all doomsday on you here, okay? Not the kind of history that I'm worried about repeating. It's more like this, and here's what I mean. I'm a little worried about how the church will respond to the next crisis. That's what I'm a little worried about, okay? I know none of us want to, but let's just kind of walk down memory lane real quick, okay? 2020 was a year of crises, right? It was a year of crises, big crises. Of course, with the pandemic and all of the deaths and We had the lockdowns and all of that loss and all the uncertainty and the tensions about what the government could and couldn't do. We had all of that. We had tensions around the vaccine, and is it safe, is it not safe, and should you do it or should you not, all that. Of course, we had the murder of George Floyd that same year, all the demonstrations and unrest. Maybe you forgot about this one, 46 million acres of Australia burned before our eyes. You probably remember the election of that year, how contentious that was, of course, leading to a riot in the Capitol. Murder hornets. That was a fun one, right? It's just one crisis after another. And as I think back and try to reflect and remember, how did we respond? How did the church respond to some of those? And as I recall, it was kind of a mixed bag, okay? From my perspective, I think some of us responded pretty well, pretty Christ-like even, as best as we could. None of us were perfect, myself included, but some good stuff. But here's the other thing I watched happen. It just happened all too often during some of those crises. I watched the church just divide. Just divide. And the church divided along the same lines as everybody else. Some of us lost friends and family to the virus. Some of us did. Almost all of us lost a friend or a family member to a different tribe, so to speak. Battle lines were drawn, mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine, climate catastrophe or climate hoax, red or blue, right? And if you were on the other side of that line, whatever the line was, if you were on the other side of it, you felt like you were the problem, or you felt like the other side was the problem. There wasn't much of a distinction in how the church approached some of these things and how the rest of the world approached them. It was pretty similar. And so now here we are, okay, 2023, almost done, and 2024 coming. And we've got different crises. We've got the war in Ukraine. We have this war erupting in the Middle East. We have another election cycle about to go into full swing. Not to mention the increased contention around social issues like gender and sexuality, and what are schools teaching, and where's culture going, and who knows what else we're going to face, okay? So I'm saying, confessing to you, I'm worried specifically, how are we going to respond? How are we going to respond? Will we respond similarly to what we did 3-4 years ago? Or will we be different? And here's the thing, there's never a shortage of voices telling us how we ought to respond, right? Isn't that weird? Here's how the church should respond to the next crisis, whatever it is, right? No shortage of voices. Our country is in crisis, so here's who you should vote for. Our world is in crisis, so here's how you should think about the Middle East and Israel and Palestine and all that. Here's who you should be for, here's who you should be against. Which side are you on, right? Don't be a fence sitter. Enough of this both sides-isms, right? We're in crisis here. There's just no shortage of voices telling us that and telling us to pick a side and whatever's coming. And this isn't a new phenomenon, okay? Let's not act like it just started in 2020, right? This we're in crisis, and how are you going to respond? Which side are you on? It's not a new phenomenon. That pressure gets applied and has gotten applied for a long time now. In fact, the same tactic was used on Jesus himself, and we have the story. Open up your Bibles with me to Matthew 22, okay? Matthew 22 is where we're going to be, and we're having it on the screen here for you. But we really would encourage you to open up your own Bible. Maybe it's your phone, you use that, or maybe you brought one or in the seats. But find Matthew, it's in the New Testament. It's a little bit closer to the back than the front. It's one of those books that tell the story of Jesus' life. Matthew 22 is where we're going to be. Here's the story, okay? They, meaning the Pharisees, from the context, The Pharisees sent their disciples, so not Jesus' disciples, but these are Pharisees' disciples, people who followed the Pharisees. The Pharisees sent their disciples to him, to Jesus, along with the Herodians, and we'll talk about that too. So two groups, the disciples of the Pharisees and the Herodians, they're going to see Jesus. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Like, you're not a people pleaser. You say the hard things. You stand for what's right. So tell us then, what's your opinion? Which side are you on? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? So there it is. Okay, same phenomenon. Look at the setup again. You're a man of God, right, Jesus? Of course you are. You're a man of integrity, aren't you? Sure you are. You're a man of principle, aren't you? Absolutely, right. You're not someone who's worried about what other people think. I'm sure you're not. You know, you're someone who's not afraid to say the hard things, right? So tell us, take a stand. What's your stance? Which side are you on? And so let's talk about some of the details here just for a second, because you got to kind of unpack what I think we get that phenomenon, but what's going on here? First of all, this interaction happens in the city of Jerusalem at a time of year when tensions in Jerusalem, political, religious, societal, whatever they are super high. And here's why. Jesus is just days away from being crucified, although nobody's thinking that except for Jesus. But everybody's in Jerusalem and tensions are high, and he's actually about to get crucified because everybody's there to celebrate the largest and most holy of religious festivals of the year, the Passover, okay? And it's usually at this time of year, every year they all descend upon Jerusalem, they pack it out to celebrate it. It's at this time of year that the chatter around the Roman Empire and the politics of that, and they're an oppressor, and we're God's chosen people, and da-da-da, right? The chatter starts to go from a whisper to more of a public kind of conversation. And maybe there's this Messiah that God's going to send to come and overthrow the Roman rule and to lead us back, okay? And Jesus, in this particular week, is right in the center of that. He's right in the center of that. Speculation about him being God's chosen one, being that Messiah, again, has gotten real loud. And it's gotten so loud that they started shouting, Hosanna, welcoming him as king into the city. That's just happened. So tensions are through the roof. The city's kind of a powder keg. But these Pharisees and these Herodians, they don't want to see any of that happen. They don't want to see Jesus welcome as king or anything else like that because, actually, for very different reasons. Okay, so the Pharisees, maybe you know, like Jesus has this long confrontational history with them. He's calling them out on their hypocrisy. He's saying, you guys are so intent on following the letter of the law, but you do nothing that captures the heart of it. You're all about making the sacrifices and doing the washings and wearing the right clothes or whatever, but you don't love, you don't show mercy, you don't pursue justice. And so Jesus let them have it, and the Pharisees hated Jesus for that. So they didn't want to see him be king. Now, the Herodians are very different. They don't care about any of that. They were Jewish people like the Pharisees, but they were Jews more by race or culture, not really as much by faith. And really who they were Israelis who cooperated with Rome. They were the ones that Rome selected to govern, okay? And so they were puppet leaders, but they were pretty rich and powerful puppet leaders. And so the last thing they want is to see a king that the people love more than them. And so they hated Jesus, but obviously for a very different reason than the Pharisees do. Which makes this particular interaction here in Matthew around this particular topic, paying taxes, so fascinating, right? Because Pharisees and Herodians were mortal enemies when it comes to a topic like this. right? They think very differently. They fight all the time. They're on, the Pharisees, I'm sure, are anti-tax. The taxes should go to the temple and Israeli interests. It shouldn't be going to Rome, not some foreign leader who, props up and worships these foreign gods and even envisions himself as one. Probably pretty anti. The Herodians, probably very much pro tax, right? Caesar was their patron, and so more taxes to Caesar meant more cash in their pockets. And so these two groups are couldn't be more polar opposite and hateful of one another when it came to this particular topic. And yet, in Jesus, they had found a common enemy. And so both of them saw an opportunity. And so we get to this little gem of them coming together and essentially posing this question to Jesus. Hey, Jesus, which side are you on? Because there's a right side, of course. Of course there's a right side. Which means there's a wrong one. And you better choose right. Tensions were high. You know how the crowd wants him to answer, right? They had just welcomed him as king. Tell him, Jesus, you can tell Caesar where to stick his taxes. Go do it. You can't possibly support such a pagan practice, right? You're giving money to a government who stands against everything that we believe in. That's immoral. They have no right. Take up your crown, Jesus. Take up your sword. Stand for what's right. Pick a side. Pick the right side. Pick our side. It's not a stretch to say this, okay? They really did want Jesus to go to war. Really. A war against Rome, a war for Israel, which of course was a war for God and his ways. And of course it meant against a war against their culture and a war against their neighbors. And a war against Roman ideological and theological stances, It was a war against everybody they wanted to make and envision as their enemy. And it's actually really, really common to see war language used in any kind of crisis. Think back here, just in our context. Pandemic and lockdowns were a war on freedom. That's how it was framed up. And again, I want to be careful to say, maybe you feel like that was the case. And I'm not trying to take a side. I'm just saying the language is used. The 2020 election was a war on democracy. And you saw both sides actually use that. We've seen people say there's a war on religious liberty, there's a war on families, or there's a war on Christian values. War language is used pretty often when it comes to a crisis. And in a war, there are always two sides, right? And one side is good and the other side is not. So you have to pick. And that's why war language is so often used, because it's really useful. It's powerful. It gets people to move. It gets people to act. It gets people to join up, to speak out, to support, to give towards a cause, because everything is at stake. And they, whoever they is or are, whoever they are coming. So here's Jesus, okay? He's in the middle of this thing. Here's the Pharisees. Here's the crowds. Here's the Herodians and all of Rome's armies behind him. And we're at war, Jesus. Which side are you on? Back to Matthew. But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites. How are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." So they brought him a denarius, which is about a day's wage, coin, and he asked them, "Whose image is this? Whose image is this?" Like he's pointing to the coin and there's someone's image on it, like our coins, right? There's a face on that, there's a head on that. And whose inscription is it? "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said to them, "So Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And when they heard this, they were amazed. And so they worshiped Jesus and repented and followed him. No, they went away. So what do you think Jesus meant by that phrase? Give Caesar what is Caesar's and give God what is God's. What did he mean by that? Well, I think the give to Caesar part is pretty clear. We can get that from the context, right? The question is, should we pay the tax or not? Well, Jesus said it's his coin, and his face is on it. It's his image. So yeah, it's his. Do what he wants with it. Jesus was a taxpayer, apparently. But what did he mean by the second part, Like, give to God what is God's. What do you mean by that? Well, I think he gives us a clue when he's holding up that coin and he uses that word image. Whose image is on that coin? Because Caesar's image was on that coin. It was his. And so Caesar got to govern its use. But that concept of image would have been a concept that the Pharisees were real familiar with. In fact, that concept of image was embedded in their own Bible, and in fact embedded in the very first story of their Bible. It's probably one of the earliest lessons they learned centered around that word image. So from Genesis 1, read with me. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that they may rule." And the connection there is rule like I would. If I'm going to make you in my image, you ought to live, rule, interact, build, relate, love. You ought to do all of those things like I would do them, is what God's saying. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule as though I'm in charge." So Jesus points to this image on the coin. It's Caesar's image, so it's Caesar's coin, so Caesar gets to decide how it's used. But then implicitly, Jesus is pointing to all of them and saying, God made you in his image, and so you are his. So pay taxes, don't pay taxes, this side, that side, whatever you do, you have to operate as though you are God's. You think the question is tax or no tax, right? WWGD, who would God pay? That's not the question you should be asking or how you should frame it up. I mean, for Jesus, the question isn't whose side is God on? Never the question. Jesus is always pretty clear on that. And it kind of assumes that you are too. For Jesus, the question is, are you on God's side? One more time, okay? For Jesus, the question isn't whose side is God on? Mask or no mask? Vaccine or no? What face mask would God wear? No. Hey, are you on his side? See, we have to be reminded sometimes. We are in his story, not the other way around. We're in his story, not the other way around. He doesn't get bound up in things like tax or no tax, elephant or donkey. He doesn't pick one of our sides, okay? God is a side. God is his own side. Always. And he's always on his own side. Well, that seems unfair. He's God. And he's made you and me, and he's made us to be like him, and he's commanded you and me to be like him and live like him, He doesn't take one of our sides. We take his, or we don't. But if we do, okay, and I think all of us want to, if we do, here's what being on God's side is like. God is on the side of loving your neighbor as yourself. That's what it's like. God's on the side of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what his side is like, always, always. It's never not that. God's on the side of loving your enemies and blessing those who curse you, always. Always. God's on the side of justice, he's on the side of holiness, and he is on the side of purity. Always. God's on the side of forgiving as often as needed. He's on the side of compassion and the elevation of the least of these, always. God's on the side of being quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. That's what his side is like. God's on the side of humility and gentleness. He's on the side of faithfulness and peace. I mean, these are things that he is so very clear on, so very consistent on. It's what it's like to be on God's side, always. It's always what it's like because he is always all of those things, all the time. All the time. When Jesus says, okay, give unto God what is God's, he's inviting us, you and me, he's inviting us to stop taking sides and instead start living like we're on God's side. I don't want to be confusing to you. You may feel pretty passionate about one particular side on something, and you may have very good reasons for that. I'm not trying to say that anytime you do that, for whatever reason, you're sinning or you're doing something. I'm not trying to say that. I know that's what this kind of sounds like, okay? What I'm trying to say is this. We have to start here first. And sometimes we got to stop there. Because we get real passionate about which side we're on when we should be getting real passionate about whether or not we're on God's side. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like Jesus is saying this, okay? Remember, where the rest of the world draws the battle lines is not usually where God draws them. God's already drawn the lines. I mean, he's already told us what's most important to him and what should be most important to us. The question really isn't whether or not God is on our side, whatever our side is. The question is, are we living like we are on his? One of the books that I read shortly after the pandemic and shortly after, some of the response to the crises of 2020 and beyond, this book was so helpful to me, was a book by Andy Stanley, who's pastor of North Point Community Church down in Atlanta. And North Point really is one of those churches that over the last 20 years or so, we, Prairie Lakes, has looked to at times as a model for some of our ministries and approach. But back in 2021, Andy wrote this book called Not In It to Win It, which is the book that inspired this series and some of the content. We're borrowing some of it from him. But in a couple of weeks, actually, you're going to get to listen in on a conversation that I was able to have personally with Andy himself, which is so cool. We were able to get in touch with him and his team, and after some back and forth wrangling schedules, I was able to interview him for like 30 minutes and just interview him about what he saw and how did your church, Andy, navigate some of these things and what inspired you to write this book. And if you could tell us, those this is really cool. I'm very much looking forward to you getting to see that. But in his book, one of the earliest chapters that he writes is on this tendency that we've been talking about this weekend. This tendency we have to draw battle lines and go to war in ways that God doesn't seem to. And one of the quotes, here's what he says. He goes, the problem with the culture war is that there aren't just winners and losers, there are casualties. When the church takes a leading role in the fray, the casualty is always the faith of the next generation. Their faith is sacrificed on the altar of temporary power and political gain. And I got to share a story with you that put a fine point on that quote for me. because it was from that time, and it still kind of breaks my heart to tell it today. So here's the context. I had two friends, both who used to go to Prairie Lakes, and both of them had moved away before 2020 and all that craziness. They just moved away for jobs or whatever, okay? But they both attended Prairie Lakes at the same time. They knew each other, and they weren't really close, but they knew each other. And one of these guys was and is, but he's a longtime follower of Jesus. Grew up, kind of in the church. He's pretty politically conservative and kind of maybe outspoken. But him and his family super generous, both financially with their time and their talent. Just great guy, great dad, great husband, just great dude all around. Okay. And the other guy couldn't have been more different. Not a longtime Jesus follower. In fact, not a Jesus follower really at all. But while he was in the Cedar Valley, he took some pretty significant steps towards Jesus. And he's actually someone who became familiar with our church because we were contracting him for some different services. So he'd come around the building and I'd get to know him and talk with him and started to see Jesus kind of mess with him a little bit and wouldn't have darkened the door of a church otherwise. And then I started to see him kind of respond to Jesus and take steps closer to him. And then he moved away. He took a job out of state. I stayed in touch with him. I still do, actually. But he didn't just take a step away from the Cedar Valley and Prairie Lakes. He ended up taking a step away from Jesus. And the other guy was talking, he moved away too, stayed in state, but he's out of town. Connected to a church, still following Jesus. Okay, so fast forward to 2020. These guys are Facebook friends in 2020, or at least they were. I'm sure they're not anymore. But they were friends on social media because they knew each other from their time at Prairie Lakes. I don't think they knew one another's stories, but they knew each other. Only now in 2020, they're fighting on Facebook, of course. Remember, like, there was a lot of that going on back then. Some of us kind of look back and go, man, I wish I'd done that different, right? But we were all cooped up reading whatever we were reading. And the only outlet some of us had for our frustrations or our fears or whatever was just posting things on social media. And these guys were going at it. And the out-of-state guy was pretty firmly pro-mask, pro-vaccine, those kinds of things. The in-state guy was, of course, the exact opposite, anti-mask, anti-vaccine. But they're going at it, and I'm watching this. And here's what I know. I know that this out-of-state friend of mine, well before the pandemic, has wandered away from his faith. And he is lost, in my estimation. And his soul kind of hangs in the balance. And he's not connected to a church where he's at. And I know his family situation, there's no support there. And here he is, locked in a battle with a guy who's following Jesus, connected, but yelling at him, calling him his character out, drawing battle lines in a way that I just don't think Jesus would. And I'll be honest with you, I got so mad with him. I'm just furious. Because he did not see that the guy he was arguing with in a way that I thought Jesus did. He was just trying to win the argument. The things that mattered to him were mostly political, freedom to live according to his own convictions, or say what he thought without reprisal, challenge status quo. I mean, not bad things, but at no point did he stop to think, what did the person on the other side of this argument really need from him? And would it have even mattered? So I watched the argument play out over social media. I watched my out-of-state friend just shut him out, and shut himself off further from the church. And he even articulated that in one of his interactions. Now, I know that someone could probably tell a similar story about me. And so I know God's grace is bigger than those stories. And I know that God is not done with my friend, but I do think it just happens all too often that we make it harder for people to come because we draw the battle lines where God does not. One more quote from Andy's book, okay? Oftentimes, Jesus' refusal to take sides was not out of a lack of concern. It was because what concerned him most precluded him from doing so, or precluded him from taking a side, meaning this: for Jesus, a you always took precedence over a view. And so here's what we thought, okay? Year out from the election, 2023 closes, 2024 begins. We're living in a world that's still not short of crises. Man, what would it look like if we maybe see the next year as a potential do-over? What if we didn't take sides? Maybe we're on a side, but that's not what our platform is. But instead live like we were on Jesus' side. What would that look like? How might we be different? Let me pray for us. Father in heaven, thanks for the challenge this weekend. God, it's hard for us to kind of go, ooh, what's the difference? Feels like this is the battle line. What's the difference, God? Sometimes it's hard to discern. Help us to ask the right questions, God. Help us to be open. Help us to look to you first. Jesus, give us what we need. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for that message. And if you're new to Prairie Lakes Church or newer, I want to talk to you for just a moment. A next step, a small step for you that could be really helpful is maybe you checked out our service here today and you want to learn more, you want to get some more content, you want to see who Prairie Lakes Church really is on a deeper level. A next step for you might be to follow us on our social media channels. We're active on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and every week we've got fresh content designed just for you, and we don't want you to miss out on that. Also, every single week, our services just like this are posted on demand on Sundays. So if you are not following us yet, be sure to do that. Again, we're on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We would love to connect with you there. And as always, if you need prayer or someone to talk to, we have people ready right here in this moment. If you're on Church Online, you can hit the live prayer button. If you're on social media, you can send us a message, and we'd love to be there for you. Kids, you are up next. Children's ministry is about to begin. Everyone else, will see you back next week.
Why would I worry? You never show up late, and you don't make mistakes. I'm not in a hurry, no. I'm walking at your pace, 'cause you showed a better way. In the night, I won't be afraid. You by my side, so I know I'm okay. So I will sing at the top of my lungs, the loudest praise, and it goes like, hey, you never change. Your love is strong and it won't fade away. And oh, you never let go. Every day I
Welcome to the Story Lab. This week we're talking about integrity while we take a look at what's on the inside. Candle? Oh. Blah. Missed some. Hey, I'm Carter.
And I'm Zeke.
We're talking about integrity.
Which is choosing to be truthful in whatever you say and do.
What's up with the costume?
Oh, we're putting on this fall festival for the little kids in my neighborhood. And I've stayed up late the last 3 nights researching the best costume.
You're really into this, aren't you?
It's all I can think about.
So, what are you?
You can't tell what I am?
Nuclear physicist? Computer repair guy?
No.
Oh, you're a smarty pants.
I'm a natural, right?
All right, Mr. Smarty Pants. Do you have something for us to do today?
Of course. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to remove the windshield washer fluid from these beakers.
Okay.
Whoa, where are you going?
To dump this in the sink.
No. Way too simple.
Then tell me what method we can use, Smarty Pants.
We shall employ the principle of displacement.
You really like to complicate things, don't you?
Indeed I do. Let's make it.
So is this our stuff?
Yeah, it's all right here. We're gonna see who can displace the most washer fluid in their beaker with the fewest candies. But you get to choose which one.
Let's see. Well, the pumpkins are a little heavier. I can't really tell. But the Tootsie Rolls have the fluffy ends. I choose the pumpkins.
Excellent. Ready?
You're on.
Let's Tootsie Roll.
Okay, obviously you were done faster than mine.
Right, okay. How many pumpkins did you have to use?
183.
Oh,
how about you?
Pretty good. I only had to do 113. Tootsie Rolled hold dominion over displacement.
Displacement occurs when an object enters liquid, pushing out the liquid to make room for itself. The object pushes out a volume of liquid equal to its own volume.
Good in, bad out.
Speaking of which, it's time for
the story before the story.
Today we're in the book of Philippians. Philippians is one of 21 letters in the New Testament. The leaders of the early church wanted to teach Jesus followers what was true, and they often wrote letters to do that.
The Apostle Paul sent one of these letters to the believers in the church at Philippi. Paul had spent several months in Philippi as the new church grew in the home of a woman named Lydia.
But around 10 years later, Paul was arrested. While Paul was in prison, the church in Philippi sent a messenger with encouragement and financial help.
Which is where our story starts.
Take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian. Paul had been arrested and sent to Rome to stand trial before Caesar. But for 2 years, while he waited, Paul was able to continue teaching about Jesus even though he was chained to a guard the whole time. Now, during this time, Paul wrote many letters to the new churches he had helped to start. Often he wanted to correct false teaching or to help solve a crisis in the church. But the Philippian church was a different story. Not only were the new believers growing in their love for Jesus and each other, but they even sent help to Paul in prison. Paul's response to them overflows with joy.
I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for you, I always pray with joy.
Toward the end of the letter, Paul reminded the believers how to keep growing in their peace and joy in Jesus.
Finally, my brothers and sisters, always think about what is true. Think about what is noble, right, and pure. Think about what is lovely and worthy of respect. If anything is excellent or worthy of praise, Think about those kinds of things.
Wow. Paul packs so much into that one single verse. You might think about it like a healthy diet. Your doctor or a teacher can tell you what you need to eat for your body to stay healthy and active: veggies, fruits, grains, and protein. But Paul was telling the Philippians that there's a healthy diet for their minds. We're supposed to take in and think about things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and worthy of respect, excellent, or worthy of praise. Sounds simple, right? Just control your thoughts. But it's not as easy as that, so let's give it a try. Okay. Do not think about the world's cutest baby elephant. Don't do it! I said, stop that! Okay, so did you manage not to think about a ridiculously adorable baby elephant? Yeah, me neither. After all, it was right there in our faces. See, that's how our brains work. What we put into our minds most often is what we end up thinking about. Every day, our brains are bombarded with images and ideas, YouTube ads, news about terrible things happening in the world, that weird sandwich mom put in your lunch, that kid who gave you a funny look on the bus. Before you know it, you're mired in a stew of anxious thoughts and irritations, and you feel awful without any idea why. Paul knew all about that. He knew that God designed our minds for a healthy diet of good thoughts. But it will not happen by accident. You have to choose every single day what you put into your mind. Paul outlines the mind diet like this. We should all think about things that are, first of all, true. Now, it's true that this broken world is full of hard things. But the bigger, greater truth is that God made you. God knew you and loved you before the world even began. God will always forgive when you ask and will always be with you. And God can work out even the most difficult things for good for those who follow Jesus. Okay, next up in our mind diet, think about things that are noble, right, and pure. It's not always easy to do the right thing, but it sure helps when you choose to be around people who make good choices. You can also pay attention to the stories of people in Scripture, in history, and even now, who live in a way that honors God and shows love to the people around them. This doesn't mean you have to pretend nothing's wrong in the world or even in your life, but you can choose to put your focus on what's right instead of what's wrong. Let's check out what else to put in our brains. Think about things that are lovely and worthy of respect. Now, something that's lovely is delightful. It might be grand, like a mountain view, or simple like a bird hopping across your path. Lovely might be a smile from a friend, or a really funny joke that makes you LOL for reals. Lovely might be an awesome movie or a really cool song. Now, the final piece of our mind puzzle, think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Excellence shows up when you take the gifts that God has given you and pour your heart into using them well. And you can keep your eyes out for people who are doing just that. A friend who can play beautiful music on the piano. A kid you know who has worked super hard to do the perfect cartwheel. Your teacher who manages to make each kid in the class feel loved. Paul wrote all this down for the Philippians nearly 2,000 years ago, but today, science has shown just how true it is. We often believe that how we feel is just out of our control. It's just what happens to us. But scientific studies show that almost half of feeling happy and peaceful depends on your thoughts. That should be a huge encouragement. You can change how you feel by changing your thoughts. Paul goes on to add that when we do that,
the God who gives peace will be with you.
Yeah, it takes practice, but choosing what to put on our minds is the key to becoming more like Jesus as we grow in loving God and loving others. The end.
Okay, my brain is spinning.
Copy that.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
So, what's our part in the story?
Well, you can't change what you're thinking until you actually know what's going on in your head. So the first step is to just pay attention to your thoughts.
Especially if you're feeling anxious or frustrated.
Ask yourself, what have I been thinking about? Is it true?
And even if it's true, is it something that's helpful to focus on?
Like trying to guess what someone's thinking about you, or stressing over a test that's not until next week.
Yep. Then, once you've spotted an unhelpful thought, it's time to replace it. It's always good to start with the truth of who God is and how much God loves you.
Then look for new things to focus on, like your cute baby brother, or an awesome book you're reading.
Or how you played so hard in your first soccer match even though you were nervous.
Yep. It's also super important to pay attention to the things you're watching and listening to.
Yeah, like movies and music.
And YouTube channels and books and video games.
They all affect what you're thinking about and how you see the world.
So, think positive.
Well, yes, but this is about way more than just trying to think good thoughts. When you follow Jesus, God sends the Holy Spirit to help guide you. We need power from God's Spirit to be able to change what's going on inside our heads.
Now, that's a thought I can get behind.
Me too.
You got it. See you next time.
So, here's the thing. Focus on what's true.
By filling your mind with really good stuff.
I don't think those are actually very good for your brain, and definitely not for your body.
All things in moderation. Ugh, I missed it.
Thanks for joining us in the Story Lab. See you next time. Here, let me try.
That was amazing. Oh, you got it.